Hi, I'm Ron Hall, and I'm here with Donna Horn and with Heather Hornbeck. And we are three of your professional counselors at One and All Church. And today we're going to touch on the subject of grief and loss. And Lord help us. I think all of us know on the call, and those of you listening today, that we've got a boatload of grief and loss that's been happening to us in so many different ways. And so we're going to be talking about three different sections today. We're going to talk a little bit about the reality of those losses and what some of those are. So you know that you're not alone. And number two, we're going to talk about some realities about grief and loss you might not know. And we're going to talk about, obviously, about coaching tips to help you move forward. So Donna, Heather, what comes to mind? And I would encourage you, even think about your own personal experience. What losses have you experienced from March onwards, since we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic and cultural changes and all kinds of things? So go.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. I have to be honest. It's been a boatload of losses, whether they dealt with me specifically or with people that I love. I'll start with mine. In May the 23rd. My mother died. My mother of 94 years. She's beautiful, a young woman, and it was the hardest thing, even knowing that she had was just transitioning through the proper channels, that I had to let her go. And so trusting God and not being I guess I say superhuman and too spiritual. I went to the places of grief, and I mourned and I cried and I felt the loss, and I gave myself permission to feel the loss. I know initially loss feels like it's something that's real weird. Maybe because originally in the garden, Genesis 1 and 2, we didn't expect to ever have to experience this, death and the things that deal with death and sin and those things weren't there. So, and we were immortal and we were going to continue to lose. So loss in whatever parameters was not something that we were really thinking we were going to have to deal with. But yes, we do. It was overwhelming. It brought a little loneliness. It brought a place of me understanding that even in my Eden, if you will, my precious relationship with Jesus Christ, I was still going to experience some things that I had to look in the face and that I had to deal with. So with that, I then immediately, maybe 3 days later, received a call from a beloved friend. Her son had died, and every time I turned around, there was increased loss. People were losing their jobs. They were losing their friends. We lost the ability to have church in the arena that we were used to, and things were just getting unpredictable. So we were experiencing a communal type of loss. Everybody, you lost the drive to work. That was a wonderful little time that you had. And so it's something that we're all experiencing right now. And I think we need to give ourselves a permission to go ahead and feel it.
Oh my goodness, yes. Heather, did you have some other losses not mentioned? What happened to you during the past couple of months?
Yeah, well, when I think of loss kind of in an umbrella way, I think of what it's like living in an imperfect world, and that longing that we have for perfection and our Imago Dei, kind of like Donna, you were saying, in the Garden of Eden, that we wouldn't have to experience loss. And so I feel like grief is a way that we process that part of ourselves, that where things are not perfect and we do have to go through losing things. And things not being the way we want them to be, or things changing. And so some of those things for the past few months for me or for my family have been at some levels like a loss of safety and security. You know, with my husband and I, we're not old yet, but we're old, you know, getting older. And at first it was, you know, even now still more risky. It's just, it makes you feel vulnerable in ways that you haven't felt before. And then for our sons, they, one of them is transitioning into what should be his career, but that's on hold. So it's kind of like the death of a dream, or a little bit of like the loss of, you know, certain expectations or hopes or dreams that you have, or that safety or security. And just to kind of, as I was thinking about safety needs, just to really validate that if anybody else is feeling that, it made me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is just a quick picture of this triangle. But like at the bottom, basically at the foundational level, is like security and safety are basic needs that we have as humans. And so when that is taken away, it definitely rattles us and puts us into a state of stress. And we are grieving a lot of different things, more than normal, in a community kind of way right now. So it's really something that I find all of my clients, all of my family, everybody that I know is experiencing at some level, some way or another. Some part of it.
Heather, can you say a little bit more about the hierarchy of needs and some of the losses? Can you work your way up with that just real quick for us? For the losses on each one of those? I mean, you've introduced it. Let's go ahead, because there's a lot of losses in the whole hierarchy of needs by this dude named Maslow.
Yeah, and you guys add in any thoughts, but at the bottom is like physiological needs, so warmth, rest, food. So thankfully I've had that, but let's say you
can you hold it up so we can see it?
Oh yeah. So if you change, let's say you lose your job or something, and something's at risk there with just being able to provide enough food. So that's at the bottom layer. So physiological needs could be the case, or if you're sick, if you have COVID. But and then the one above that is safety needs. So that's the safety and security. So just the threat of all of this, and even the security of like whether you keep a job, or whether there's a lot in that layer. And then the next layer is belongingness and love needs, which this is definitely hitting that area too. We're all virtual right now. We are rarely seeing anybody in person. Are we feeling like some of our belonging is being tested? We're not in church settings. We're not in work environments anymore. It's very different. And then above that is esteem needs. So feelings of accomplishment or prestige. He puts that, so that might make me think of like, there's people that aren't able to work anymore. So that probably is testing those kinds of things, or people that needed to move into, like, to go to college. They're starting their first year of college, or they need to start their first year of a job, or just anything that's happening that, their sense of accomplishment might be affected right now. Do you guys have anything else you want to add on that? Or
I was thinking as you were saying that, that the loss, what happens here, all of those individual listings have to do with what makes us feel, or what we identify with. Those are when we lose what we feel was a piece of identity, of our identity, that creates feelings of loss. That job is a piece of our identity. Going and worshiping in the church sanctuary was a piece of our identity. Coffee and candid conversation with a couple of good friends it's a piece of our identity. And losing my mother is a piece of my identity. It's going to change my actual, my reality, to lose it. And with so many losses, some of us have experienced one or two, but some of us really do feel very much bombarded, with so many types of loss we experienced at one time. The emotions are tense and chaotic. It's like a ball of confusion, abandonment. We don't know what to feel. And we don't know how to feel it. And we have not even stopped to identify what we're feeling about what we're feeling, because there's so many. We lost a job, that loses, creates a loss in our self-worth. It creates a loss in, it's kind of like a continual ball and chain that at this season in time is very overwhelming. It can be depressing. It can produce fear. But very honestly, the grief is a proper response to loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And then just quickly, this last level is achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. So we've kind of talked about some of that, but one thing I have to say on a positive note is I have seen with maybe the loss of our normal routines, one of the positive sides of that is a little bit more time. Some people are experiencing a little bit more time to try something they haven't tried before. So along with all the negatives, there are some positives, and some people have been trying creative things, or they're spending more time with family. So, it's something
I just think, as you say that, I think validating the losses, 2020, the graduates, whether it's college or high school, not having that traditional, we kind of work all the way to grade school for that moment, those traditional type of ceremonies. And I don't think the loss of my mom is any bigger than the loss of that traditional ceremony. That's certainly not to negate what I have lost, but I think if we commonize it and see that everybody has experienced out of a normal, in these unprecedented times, a different type of loss, and that kind of helps us to kind of be there for the next person. If I'm making if I'm making myself clear, because there's so many different types of loss. I know with my mom's death, we could not have a funeral. That's a traditional type of loss that you don't make it without those arms and the condolences and the family that you can sit next to and the encouraging words. Yeah, we kind of got inventive and we did it through Zoom, and was grateful for that, but it was just not the same, so just let us look at that this unpredictability right now is causing a lot of different types of grief. And I for one, want people to give themselves permission to grieve.
Yeah, and there's so many changes going on right now. I know it hit me hard to know that, I've been a therapist for a long time, and when I found out that I can't see clients anymore, we can't do it in office, then we got to do it behind masks. I honestly, what am I going to do? How am I going to help people? How am I going to do my job? How am I going to do my ministry? And there's a lot of positive things that could come from change, things we can't do. I discovered Zoom. I knew about Zoom, but I refused to do it because I was convinced the only way to do people is to do it in person, in the same room. And I discovered that there's a lot of things you can do by Zoom. And actually, it's been a blessing for our church because, as we've all discovered, now we can do Zoom throughout the state with our counseling services, and with our coaching services we can do throughout the world. What other positive things can come out of grief and loss and change? Just talk about some of those realities. What comes to mind?
One thing that comes to my mind is just the verse that in the same way that God comforts us, we can comfort others. And so I think when we go through difficult times, there are things that are strengthened in us and that we can experience from others and from God that we may not have as much experience with. And so one of those is comfort. And we're kind of all in some ways on the same playing field. I think the whole world really is experiencing this, which is very unusual at the same time. And so it's kind of, I feel like it's drawing out our humanity in ways, some things good, some things not good. But yeah, I think that's something, that is good, is that we can really relate to each other and kind of stand there with each other during this time. It's one thing.
I would agree. I think the positivity that's coming out of it is that we are going ahead and allowing ourselves to experience the grief. And so in so doing, we're seeing how much we really do love, how much we really do care about other people. You would probably not think that that's the way that it's happening, but it is drawing us together in creative ways. It's causing us to um, create a new reality, and it's causing us to remember how much we love those people that we used to share that coffee with, or the drive that we went to work with, or whatever the situation is, the visits that we used to make over to the neighbor's house. We're seeing how important people are to people. And if we will always remember that people are God's #1 priority, then we kind of fit right into aligning ourselves with Him. It's kind of making us a little less selfish, I would say. I don't know if everybody sees it that way, but I think it's pulling us into a good place where we can be comforters as well as be comforted.
Yeah, I think we're really seeing the priority, and this is where we have power to move out of the grief and move forward. If we see a lot of positive things we can do, like being pastoral with people. And one thing that I found, that I've discovered, is like everybody else, I'm caught up in the whole election, and I think disaster is going to strike if a certain president doesn't get elected or does get elected, or things like that. So I have no stones to throw at anybody on that one. But I have to say is that if I look out and get caught up in that's going to be our salvation, and that's going to be my peace. And get caught up in the fear factor, it's going to cause me to go into more turmoil, more loss, more grief. And so what I need to do is I need to focus up, not out. God's got me. If I think about the times that God has intervened in my life, times that He's intervened in life and helped me to make adaptation through loss and grief, which forces us to make changes, it has really helped me. The opportunities that all three of us have got, being part of the professional counseling team at ONE&ALL Church, to help people. If we can keep that mentality, that can really help all of us, regardless who you're talking to. And I've noticed that if somebody is getting really angry about what's going on around us, if I look at that as being an opportunity to help bring peace, to look up versus out, to bring faith versus fear, I mean, it so much helps me just to change my frame of mind. Do you find that also from your perspectives?
Yes, I really do. When I think about what you're saying, reaching up, looking up, I think about being stabilized. First of all, giving yourself permission to grieve. I'll say that again, because if we don't give ourselves permission to grieve, to feel the pain, and pain being a signal of distress, then we don't work on the distress. We kind of push it in the background, and that's a dangerous thing to do. So if we keep looking up, we look up to Elohim, if you will, the mighty one. We look up to Elohim Shammah, the God that hears, and that's a strengthening a place for us. A place where we're able to be real and feel those pains. God is an active listener. So it's the place where we can go to Him and tell Him about. Let's never forget that Jesus wept, He mourned, and He gave us that permission. He told us, I believe it is in Hebrews, that He's well acquainted with grief. So we're not alone. We're not by ourselves. We do have a Savior that is and has identified with what we're going through in various ways. And so if we trust that He hears the cries of our heart in those pain, we can receive the comfort from Him. He's our strength, Psalms 28:7. He's near in the midst of it. That's what took me through. I know personally when my mom passed, being a counselor, I knew the stages of grief, denial, all of these various things. And I knew what I was going to have to kind of stop and deal with. And I knew my clients needed me, and yet I knew what I needed some time to grieve as well. And so I took a few
Hey,
days.
Donna, talk a little bit about the stages of grief while we're on that.
Oh goodness. Jump in, Heather, help me. I don't have them all in front of me. And mainly because when I looked at the stages of grief and the most recent studies, it was such that they were pre-loss, denial you guys help me.
All right, I've got them. I've got them. So you've got denial, you've got anger, you've got bargaining, you've got depression, and you have acceptance and moving on. So we go through.
There we are.
I kind of think about those as being. I like what I heard recently. They're not so much stages. They're more like being at the beach in waves that hit you, and be this kind of wave that hits you, and then this other kind of wave hits you, or a smaller wave hits you, and then behind that it's like, are you kidding? That big wave's coming, and all of these waves. And when we talk about these 5 stages of grief, they can happen in any order. And what I always like to see is called a ball of grief. It's kind of like all these emotions. And the longer one goes through changes and adapts, the more we're going to get into more of acceptance and peace. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And in fact, we're going to talk about a ball of grief, weren't you?
Well, I mean, I have the ball of grief picture, and
oh, perfect. Go ahead and share it.
Really, this isn't the one I was going to show. There's a slightly different kind of way to think of this, but these are just all the emotions. And if you want to look it up online, you can. And it just shows how many different emotions that are normal to experience during grief. But there's everything in there from, apathy, sorrow, depression, confusion, anxiety, rage, hurt, rejection, and it goes on. So I think sometimes people feel guilty or embarrassed, or like they have to hide the fact that they are, having a really hard time right now. And kind of like Donna said, just the permission to grieve and the knowing that it's okay and it's normal. And that, like, I've heard one time, like, it's holding the space for the difficult work of grieving, and just being willing to hold that space and really go through that, and let it take its process. I think of things as like God creates, he creates everything. And so he's created a process that's a natural process if we allow it to happen. And grief is a way that we move through the processing of those things. So I have these pictures. Okay. So I have, this is another way to think of it. Like at the beginning, usually of loss, there's like, if we look at this box and it's like our life, and then grief is big. And this is like the pain button. So grief will, it's kind of hitting, you'll have pain a lot of the time, because as it's such a big amount of grief, and it's going to hit this pain button like all the time. But then as time kind of goes on, it gets smaller, and it's still going to hit the pain button, and you'll experience it kind of in the waves, like Ron said. But it may not be just as often where you're, feeling all those feelings. And then eventually, as it continues to process through, it's still there, and it'll probably be there forever, especially if you lose like a family member or something like that. But it'll just hit the pain button less and less. So it's not, the goal isn't to, especially if you lose a person, isn't to like get rid of that completely forever, but it's just that you wouldn't be experiencing the pain so often and so much. And so it's encouraging to me that there is a process, and that God has created it, that there is a way to move through, and it will get better. So to never lose hope, and to just know that.
Yeah, I've got a question to throw out at you. So how long does grief last? I mean, that's a question, and I know we're all going to kind of laugh at that one, but how long does it take to get through grief? Let's talk about that for just a minute.
I did come prepared with my grief ball, but how long does it last? it lasts as long as you allow it to yourself to go through the process. If you don't give yourself permission to move through the process, then you go to suffering. You kind of transition from the pain of grief to suffering, and they're two different. Grief, it does, as you saw with the pictures that Heather, it does diminish, ameliorate, it reduces. And so then where you'll have the wave, it's been May 23rd, so we're in August, and maybe a song will come and those emotions will come by and trigger, oh, that's the song we had at our service. But it's like a scar rather than a wound. When you allow yourself to move through it, you can remember it, and then with it, when it ameliorates, you can then go to the things that were good with it. You have comfort in the midst of it. Does that make sense? So it's important, though, that your story is not my story. So, some people say, turn the page, get over it. The job is gone, go get a new one. If you're grieving that, allow yourself to go through the process. Don't try to rush yourself through it, because each of us grieve differently, and that's important. But know, as the pictures Heather showed, that as you go ahead and proceed through it, knowing that God is near, I'm going to stay with my God, and that he's near, and that he is the one that hears you, and know those things, that he's your strength, and you continue to allow him to comfort you through it, it will ameliorate. And as Heather said, you will find yourself processing and dealing with your new reality. My new reality is that I have to remember a beautiful mommy in my heart. And at this point, I'm able to do that more effectively and reach out to someone who still has immediate grief.
So Donna, on that note, I know our time is a little bit limited here. Let's go to what can we do? Coaching tips. We've got about probably five or at most. We've probably got 7 or 8 minutes left. And
okay.
Let's go for coaching tips. Go.
Deep breathing, writing, journaling, get your feelings out. Go ahead and walk with them, live with them. Self-regulation. Go ahead and cry when you need to. Give yourself permission to cry. Like I said, with me, comfort someone else in the midst of your grief. If you're at that place, no matter if it's an identical, a loss of life or a loss of job, commonize, be there for somebody else. Replace in a of the grief in a fulfilling way. Find a way to replace the grief, or not to just push it away, but to like volunteering or something like that, to replace the grief with a positive emotion, if you will, rather than negative or numbing emotions, like grabbing something that would not be a positive soother. Some, how we kind of, food or alcohol or something like that. That's kind of like a Band-Aid. So it doesn't do the real job of helping you through it. So, the scripture is always a good place to find comfort, Matthew 5:4. Know that you'll be comforted. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Be assured that your God is with you. And go ahead and go through the natural processes. And allow what he has already ordained outside of time to work for your benefit, and don't feel like you have to fight it.
Heather, I've got a couple.
That was pretty good. You covered so much, Donna. I think, I kind of think of it as like just being careful to take care of all parts of ourselves, which, this is simplistic, but like our physical self, our body, our emotions, and our mind, and then our mind. So one thing with like the physical area is just, thinking about enough sleep and healthy food, and maybe walks, getting out in nature, maybe having distractions that are healthy and refreshing and fulfilling. So if you enjoy nature, getting out, getting out into those environments. And it's okay to take breaks, to say, you know, I'm going to try not to feel for a little bit. I'm going to just really try to distract myself with people or by doing something I enjoy. And then you can get back to the work of grief. You don't have to do grief work 24/7. That would probably overwhelm us. And also just, finding support. So I think support can come with friendships. It can come with groups. And most of all, I think God supports us, and he kind of, books can also be a support, learning new things and reading things. And I probably have more, but go ahead, Ron, you go with yours.
All right. I had just a couple more. Don't forget that with anxiety, which anxiety can be brought about by loss and grief. Remember that your nervous system is going to get depleted of essential vitamins and things like that. Now, I'm not so I can't give advice on that, but I would encourage you, make sure you're taking supplements and things as needed. You know your system better than I would, so you might want to think about that. In a world of unpredictability, and we don't know when unpredictability is going to end. We all know that. Focus on what you can control and what's predictable at this point. And know that God is going to be there with us regardless of how long it goes. And this thing will end, as I've said to several people. You know, a year from now, God forbid it's still going on a year, but a year from now, which I don't think it will be, we're going to look back and say, wasn't it great? I got to stay home and work from home and all these things. And, you know, I did lose my job. I got laid off, but I got a better job. And hard time to go through, but there was a lot of good things that came out of it. So, and focus where you have power. Obviously, it's been said many times, don't isolate, be in community. Remember, we have everything's online. You have more access to stuff now than you ever did at One and All. Make sure that you're not socially isolating. Physically isolating is a good idea to keep us safe, obviously. Don't socially isolate. You've got more opportunities from the comfort of your own home. Let's see, what else? Obviously, we've talked about focus on faith and not fear. We've talked about that. Focus where you can make a difference. We've talked about that. And I want to share just a quick story before we close. Is there anything else, ladies, that we should hit? We hit on the major ideas?
We did. Can I just add one quick thing?
Please, Heather.
I think that rest is, even though it might feel like we're resting because we're at home a lot, or we're quarantined a little bit, rest is really, really important. I think of like all the stress that we're under, it makes us lose our margin, and it kind of puts us up at the top, like our emotional stress. And so rest is actually something that is really, really important, especially right now, so that you don't stay like in survival mode 24/7, which then if you stay in like sustained stress without rest, it's just going to get worse. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your mind. So it's just to rest. God created rest. Rest is a gift. He created Sabbath rest. So take some time.
And I'll add something to that.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Donna. No, go.
No, I just have a look. Then that's the important piece, that rest, and I'm going to again stretch that rest to the Sabbath part of a mindset, a spiritual rest, and being confident in the God who is in charge. All of this, even our losses, are not a surprise to him, and so he is in control. And if we rest in our hope in him. And for me, my mother being the believer, I know where she is. So I'm not like those that don't have a hope either. I have the hope of seeing her again. So that spiritual place of rest is equally important, and maybe even more so, or just the balance across to making the physical rest and all of those other things. We're spirit beings. So we need to make sure that we stay in the proper place and mindset of rest by his spirit as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's important with as we're bringing up the subject of rest, that you get out in nature. You see this picture behind me. I was singeing on the fringes of my life lately because it's just been a lot of extra things that we've needed to do to take care of people at One and All, and especially through the care and support ministries. And so I got a chance to go to this beautiful place, Arches National Park in Utah, just for a couple of days. And it was so refreshing, even at 105-degree heat, mind you. It was very refreshing to get out and see beautiful things of God's creation like this. And so we need to get out. Another quick example is that the other day I did a 4-hour prayer time. And I had a wonderful time taking a slow walk, mind you, with my coffee, with my Starbucks, in a park. And I asked Jesus to join me and take this walk with me. And you could call it divine intervention, divine revelation. He gave me things of rest I had not thought of for me, and led me to pray for specific people that he did divine intervention in their lives. I can't mention names because they're personal stories that were told to me, but I'll let those people speak if they would like to. And so have that divine rest is really important, and get out to a nice place like this. So how I'd like to end our time is, and our focus here is on an internal difference. And it is not only a prayer, but it has a lot to communicate. So if everybody on this call would just bow your head, and I'm going to read this and just internalize this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. As we live one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking, as he did Jesus, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and ever in the next. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Thank you all for joining us. I thank you again, Heather and Donna. And by the way, a little advertisement for Donna. Donna happens to be our grief expert, and she leads the grief support group, grief recovery support group. That will be offered here in just a few days, actually. You can sign up with our community group finder on our website. So thank you again, everybody joining us, and we'll be back with you in the future with other help. Please feel free to call us at the Care and Support or any of our ministries. We have a pastor on call every day of the week during the week, and you can always leave a message with reception. We are here to assist, and we've got professional counselors, we've got life coaches, we've got Regeneration, our recovery ministry, we've got all kinds of resources. Look at our website, our call in, and make sure you're catching all of our messages. They're just greatly insightful and will inspire and give you that refreshment. God bless.